Well, welcome to the question and answer program. I'm Arn Matson. I'm here with Chuck Missler. It's the 29th of April, 2015. And Chuck, normally I'm the one firing a battery of questions at you, but today we have a special guest on.
A very special guest. It's going to be my pleasure to introduce a very special friend. And so I'm looking forward to this coming time. And how are we going to, will that come on now?
Yep,
or?
yep.
Okay.
And so we'll have Kim Clement is going to be joining us. And hello, Kim. Welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you. It's a real honor and privilege. I've been watching you and learning, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. And yes, I consider you good friends too. Thank you.
Very special friends. Yeah, we bet you. In fact, that's one of the things I'd like to just start by and let you tell us. How did you come to cross our path, and how did we come to know each other? And tell us about your journey.
Okay, let me start by saying that for people that don't know a little bit about my history, I was not raised in church. I was a trained classical pianist through Trinity College of London. I became a rock musician, got into drugs, and in 1974 I found Christ in the streets. And so that's where my journey started. And so I've been ministering since 1974. We did some street work, and so that's where it all started. And I think I'd like to use an example, if you don't mind, the story of Mephibosheth, which a lot of people may not know this person, but he was the son of course of Prince Jonathan and the grandson of King Saul. And I'd like to share this because my journey is, even though it's been very exciting and interesting, it also, I got to a point where I started despising eschatology, and even to the point where I started mocking it because I'd seen too much prediction. I've seen a lot of predictions that caused a lot of fear and torment and trouble in people's lives. And so I had to make a change, and I had to do that. And this only happened a few years ago, and because of certain things that happened. But I want to say something to your audience as well about making mistakes, about being incorrect, is that it is possible. The Bible says in 2 Samuel 9 that Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, but he ate continually at the king's table and was lame on both his feet. And in thinking about that, I was thinking that, Mephibosheth was no great ornament to a royal table. Yet he had a continual place at David's table, because I think it was because David could see in his face the features of the beloved Jonathan that he loved so much. And, I think that God's people are dear because of someone else's sake. David saw Jonathan in Mephibosheth, and because of Christ, God sees Christ in us. And so, he had a deformity that we know about. He was lame. And that was a great deformity because it happened when he was a kid. But our deformity cannot rob us of our privileges. Lameness is no bar to sonship. The cripple is as much the air as if he could run swiftly. And this is the point I'm trying to make here, is that sometimes bad nursing in spiritual infancy often causes wrong ideas, misconception, and many times error from which they never recover. And I'd like to say that there was a flaw in my life. I had good parts. Mephibosheth had good parts. His hands worked, his heart worked, his mouth worked, but his feet didn't work. And so for people that are quick to judge because they saw that fault where I was opposed to the rapture, I was opposed to any form of eschatology, because I still sat at his table and I still loved him and he still loved me. And because of my love to God, he turned what could have been a curse into a blessing because of what happened. So that I wanted to say that to start, that my love for God is so deep that I had to take steps to correct what I realized was blatant disregard and disdain for a large portion of eschatology, because I felt that these were doctrines of death and the aftermath, And so I treated it as an area of theology that I wanted to avoid. And, I mean, there were so many other areas that I could study. I could study theology, Christology, pneumatology, bibliology, angelology, the whole lot, and stay away from eschatology. And so that's what happened in my life. But it got to the point where I was so discouraged because I felt that there was a mentality of escapism where we should really be on the earth blessing and helping, that I actually wrote on my website in 1996, Rapture Crapture.
Oh boy.
Because I was so, and people, of course, we just ignored it. I mean, I even stood up one day and said, I have no clue what the book of Revelation is about. I don't have one clue, and I don't really want to know. The other thing that happened was that attitude put me in opposition against Israel as a nation. Now, that sounds very strange, I know, because I'm so supportive of Israel. But I felt like Israel was just a waste, and that we were spiritual Israel. And this is where, in my own encouragement or exhortation and even prophetic utterances, my perception of Israel was it's totally spiritual Israel. There is no such thing as God's land anymore. And so my prophecies would even, the vocabulary that I'd use would be my spiritual Israel. And so the error came because of my ignoring and ignorance of eschatology and end-time events. So I want your viewers to understand that it affected my outlook on the end times. So, I was just, that's where, anyway, so I got to that point where I even wrote songs, about, I'm not afraid of the lion's den, I'm not afraid of the fire, I'm not afraid of the 666, and I'm not afraid of the beast. And we'd all sing it together and sort of, almost mock, because we had seen so much prediction that he's coming soon, that it really hurt me in the end. And then something beautiful happened. I went to Israel to do a concert. I hope I'm not speaking too much. You can interrupt me anytime.
No,
Carry on.
Carry on. We're engaged to here.
Okay. So in 2008, this is how far it went. I went to Israel and had a concert on Mount Carmel. As you know, I'm a musician, and so I have a band, and we do. When I stood on Mount Carmel, it was almost like God put me in a position, because I was there to do music, but I thought, what am I going to say about Israel? Because I don't believe, in literal Israel. I was a replacement theologist, really. And so when I was on Mount Carmel, 1,800 people, millions of people watching, the Spirit of the Lord came upon me, and I started speaking about God's hand upon Israel, the land. And I was confused because it wasn't making sense to me. You can understand, I'm trying to teach the people that the kingdom is here and it's now, and everything pertains to now. And that's when the Spirit of the Lord began to deal with me. And Jane was with me at the time, and she said, we should start an internet broadcast, because we have a good following. And I said, what am I going to do? She said, well, you sit behind a camera and you preach, you teach. And I said, I could never do that. But anyway, she heard the voice of God, as she'd done so many times during my life. And we came back to Los Angeles and set up a little room, and we put a camera there, and I put a piano in front of me. And I started teaching, and our internet broke down. We had such a large audience, hundreds of thousands of people watching. And what happened was I started learning about Israel. That's where it all started. And then very reluctantly, I was placed in the position, it was God, obviously, where it was suggested to me, why don't you start an online church? I said, don't be crazy. Can you imagine me? I'm not a pastor. I'm a prophetic voice. My music is, I'm a psalmist. And they said, no, I think that, and the Spirit of the Lord was obviously dealing with me about it, but I could never imagine myself being a pastor. I don't even like to say the word. And, I would say to them, listen, I'll just fill the ship, and we'll go out to sea and then I'll sink it. I said, there's no way I'm going to be a pastor. But the thing is, we started an online church, and I thought we'll have, 100 people. And we ended up having tens of thousands of people join our online church, but offering it to them. Obviously, we encourage people to go to their local church too, and we ended up with 24,000 people, members of our online church. And it dawned on me, how can I not teach them eschatology? How can I not teach them about the end times? How can I keep this from these people? And my wife started, because of what was going on, started listening. And this is what I prayed. I said, Lord, if you're going to correct me, if you're going to put me straight and teach me, then I want you to send me the very, very best. Almost like Cornelius, when the angel came to him and sent him the very best. He sent him Simon Peter, and to bring that conversion about. And so that was my prayer. And Jane had been listening to various speakers. They were really great. And I started getting interested in saying, this is starting to make sense about the rapture and about the, all the different things that you teach. And so I sat there and listened, and I didn't like one of the teachers. They seemed very legalistic. And then I walked through the bedroom one day, and I heard this voice, and it was the voice of Chuck Missler. And I stopped and I listened and I listened, and I said, my goodness, this is everything's coming alive and it's making sense, this whole thing. And so I sat there and listened with her over and over. And then the Lord spoke to me and said, this is the best that I've got for you. And if you're going to learn, I'm going to send him to you. And so that's, in a nutshell, what happened. And of course, Chuck, you came. You not only taught us, and we're learning, of course, through chaos, but we actually, there was an impartation brought by your presence. And, I'm not trying to make too much of you. You are a general in the kingdom, but there's something about being in the presence of somebody. And when that person releases you from, I don't want to say demons, but, the things that I had, I almost had a spirit of mockery towards it, so that, of course, I've changed my mind about that now. And as a result of it, it's opened up a whole new avenue of truth and understanding.
Well, there's another element to this whole story that I think I need to add here. What was so incredibly impacting to us was your candor and your transparency to your audience. It wasn't something that you were privately mentioning to us as a desire and interest. You so openly, before your people, admitted the need for some correction. And that's the kind of candor and transparency, candidly, bluntly, to say it very directly, is so rare in the Christian community. So many senior pastors are really in very insecure seats, if you will. You were such a refreshing change because you were just so direct about the things that you felt were in error, and so aggressive or directed to correct that. I was just startled. And as we came out and got to know you and your people and spend time with you, I had come away from that experience with a comfort and a confidence in you personally that I have had with very few people. I spent 30 years in the corporate boardrooms in my executive career. I got to know a lot of top-notch people. When I shifted to what I'll call professional Christianity, it was a real adjustment because the caliber of people you're dealing with is so different in terms of their personal ethics. And I was just so startled how refreshing your attitude was about your ministry and your people. You were really seriously felt responsible to be faithful to them in such an open way. That is something that's hard to communicate. If we talk to strangers, it's hard to get that across. But when we were there with those people for that time, for quite some time, teaching and being with them, we really got to know them. And I'm just what I'm fumbling for here, how to communicate the personal ethics that show through the integrity of you as a person was refreshing. and I still haven't gotten over that. I felt bonded right up front on an interpersonal basis because of that candor, and to get to know you and Jane and the people you're with. When you spend time with them, you really see them off camera.
Yes.
They're for real.
Yes.
They are really for real.
Yeah.
And that is so refreshing.
Yes.
That is so refreshing. I don't know how to put it in better words.
Yeah,
Ron,
absolutely right. And I think that we saw something that you were in the midst of transition. When we were with you last summer, in 2014, you told us that really your journey with regards to the material of Chuck Missler sort of began in January, February timeframe. Yeah. And that you were really having to relearn some topics. Tell us some of those things that you were learning.
Well, let's start with the rapture. I'm just kidding, but people would come to me and say, "Why do you not believe in a rapture?" I'd say, "Look, first of all, I believe in us being taken away." I said, I just don't understand it. I don't understand the timeline. I don't understand, whether we're going in the beginning, whether we're going in the middle, whether we're going at the end, and and about the new earth. And I said, I'm not really interested. I remember sitting with Joel Osteen, the teacher and an evangelist in Houston, and him and I sat in Israel, and he said, I said to him, "Joel, do you have any understanding about the end times?" So he said, "Kim, I don't have a clue." And I was stunned. I said to him, "Don't you think we should learn about it?" This is before, we joined, linked up with you. I said, because there's so much in the scriptures that speak about this day and this age. And if I'm supposedly a prophetic voice and I don't have any clue of what Jeremiah said and what Isaiah said and all I said, how are we going to educate our people? So, and Daniel, of course, Daniel, I love Daniel. When I taught on Daniel, I'd always, apply it to, like, for instance, when the angel came to visit him, and I'd say, well, and speak about angelic visitation and avoid the end times aspect of it until, of course, I learned all the stuff through Chuck. But, people would call me a false prophet based on that aspect or absence in my presentation, my expression. I'm a worshiper. I love God. I worship for hours. I'll go in my garden, pray daily for 2 hours. So there's no way that someone that draws close to God will not discover the truth. And so, the other thing was judgment. I was very opposed to the judgment aspect of let's say, some of the teachers, the prophecy teachers, where it was a lot of judgment and very few smiles, very few little, we'd always hear about the terrible things that are coming. And so my prophetic perception was based on the absence of that aspect of theology. And so even my songs, we'd write songs that would completely avoid any part of God's judgment, aspect of God's judgment. Now, I would always say, you got to reap what you sow, and so that's God's judgment. Then something happened to me, and it was, I can't remember the year, I think it was 2003, where I prophesied that there'd be a massive hurricane, and it would happen in New Orleans, that there'd be bodies that would float on the water, and it happened almost immediately after that. There was a week or so after that it happened. Of course, this caused a big stir, because in it I spoke about God's judgment, and because of the watchmen on the wall, and that they weren't doing their job. So, so that was one of the things I could not understand. The marriage, when you taught on the marriage and the Jewish wedding, and how the bridegroom would go and then come back, and she wouldn't know when he would come back. It was just fascinating. And all of this sort of suddenly made sense to me. So, it affected me greatly, and it still is, because I'm learning so much stuff. And it's helped me understand the scriptures better, far better than looking at it from a kingdom perspective only. You know, when I say only, I mean, you know, there's some bad things about that too. You know, people would call me a false prophet, saying he doesn't believe in rebirth, he doesn't believe in the rapture, he doesn't believe in the second coming. Well, that's not true. I just didn't understand it, and I prefer not to deal with it. Now I am dealing with it. And my mother called me one day, and my mother lives in South Africa. She's quite funny. She doesn't follow me. She doesn't like my ministry much. But she says, "You're too loud. You make too much noise." And so
Typical mother.
So she called me one day and she said, Kim, I just heard you're a false prophet. I said, Mom, I've been a false prophet for years. So I was just joking with her.
Well, there's a sound bite. What, in terms of the material that you've gone through, how is the material that you've been listening to from Chuck and the Koinonia Institute, how is it affected, or you've spoken generally about what you didn't believe. How is it affecting now your ministry going forward? Obviously, you have a ministry that reaches tens of thousands of people around the world. Has it changed the dynamic or the content of that at all? And if so, how?
Well, first of all, I'm realizing it's closer than than I realized. The events that are unfolding. Now, when we deal, like for instance, when I watch the news, you know, it's all making sense. You know, it no longer is it, well, that cannot be a sign of the time. Now I'm understanding that it is actually a sign of the time. It is an end time event. And so when we go on to our, what we call code breakers on our Den broadcast, where they take certain prophecies that we had prophesied, and we connect the dots with my prophecy. Now what we've done is we've gone to the prophets, you know, the prophets of old, and connected it with them. And so it's very biblical at the moment. So we that's where it's affected our expression. So we're able to connect the dots for end time events with the holy prophets of old, not just with my prophetic utterances. And that's actually being put more in the background, and we're connecting it with scripture now, you know, where it makes more sense. So that's one of the things. Also, you know, a man came to me once who was a billionaire, and he sort of followed my ministry for a while in the 90s, and when we were working in Hollywood. And he said these words to me. He said, you know what, the only way that I can stay on the straight and narrow is by seeing or understanding or perceiving God in his judgment. I'm just reading what he wrote here, what I wrote down. He said, first of all, he was a billionaire, but he was also a coke addict. And he said to me, the only way that he could remain on the straight and narrow was to think of God's judgment and anger rather than his grace and his love. And I said to him, and you know, those years, I said to him, why would you stay on the straight and narrow based on God's judgment and anger as opposed to his love and mercy? That was one of the things that I felt a lot of prophecy teachers focused on, was more judgment and wrath and anger, and not the love and the mercy and so much. So in other words, that's why I turned that way. Today we have, because of Chuck and because of the various teachings, going back to Genesis. I mean, it's amazing where I've been able to glean from that and even bring it into my teachings. And so that's one of the things I can share with you that is very important.
Right. So the material, going through some of the expositional things, not just about eschatology. You begin really of getting the eschatology correct, but then you begin to see it's in the whole counsel of God that you need to look at. First of all, that's what underpins solid eschatology, is by understanding the whole of Scripture. And,
that's right. That's right. And so going back to Genesis, that's where we learn so much. I mean, there's so much I could tell you, loads of stuff, but you know, that's how. So you were asking me how it affected my expression and even my songwriting. You know, what
do you see going forward now? I mean, you've you've had sort of a change of direction, a paradigm shift within your ministry, and you're coming on board with a lot of the Koinonia Institute and Chuck Missler material, and so the systematic teaching. Do you see yourself becoming more of a systematic teacher, or just having it be something that underpins what you're currently doing?
No, I think I'm going to definitely. What I'm doing right now is I'm studying and I'm listening. I'm soaking it in, because I'm not going to teach something that is not truly a revelation to me, and it is becoming that. So I'm eating it. I'm consuming it. You know, I used to pray a prayer every day, or just about every day, and that was about the heavenly sower. And I used to say to myself, is my heart rooted in sincere love and fidelity to Jesus? If he plants a seed and my heart is hardened and rocky and unmoved during a season of grace, then the seed will germinate for a season, but ultimately it will wither and die, because it cannot flourish in a heart that is hard, that is unmoved, and is unsanctified. And this was the prayer I prayed, and that's why I got into this position, where I said, Heavenly Sower, plow me first, and then cast your truth in me. And then I will yield you a bountiful harvest. Not knowing that aspect that had been hardened in my heart was, of course, towards the teachers of prophecy and the different things that we are learning today. And so God did that. He honored my prayer. And so a systematic teacher, absolutely. But I'm soaking it in, I'm learning, I'm listening. And I think that's where we will be going. And of course, I want to get more teachers in that are well equipped, that are trained, that can train others like Chuck, so that they can actually do a lot of the teaching for me. Whereas before, I would never have allowed that.
Interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah. With regards to the newfound knowledge and stuff you have, obviously as you get into the end time scenario, it's not only about countries and economies and wars and rumors of wars, but it's also about a spirit of deception.
Yes.
And as a person who operates in the world of prophecy, how would you distinguish? Because the Bible says in the end times there'll be false prophets. How would you instruct someone how to distinguish the difference between a true prophet and a false prophet?
Well, and you know this very well, and your viewers know this very well, that you shall know them by their fruits. And, that's the first and the most important thing. The fruit not only of their lives, but of their prophecies too. And so, there are many false prophets around, and if they're not biblical, obviously, that's one of the key things to look at. And if their prophecies, obviously, if they're not biblical and they predicting stuff that is just insane. I was quoted as being prophesying that Jesus was coming back in 22 years, which is the year 2000 and what was it, Jay? 2033. And they got on there and said that I predicted the second coming of the Lord, or at least the rapture, I should say. And well, that was not true. But I would say you've got to judge by the content of their biblical understanding, because prophets are not supposed to walk around prophesying all the time. They're supposed to be able to teach as well and understand the word and understand So I just think there's a lot of people out there that are doing it for money. I was offered a few years ago. Somebody called me and said he was a prophet. He said, "I want you to come to my church, and I want you to prophesy over individuals." And he said, "I'll give you $25,000.
Well,
so I said, first of all, how can you afford to do that? Well, what are you doing? Because this was about 10 years or 12 years ago. It was a lot of money. And he said, well, first of all, we charge for our prophecies. And I said, and what do you charge? He said, well, we charge $25 for an individual, $50 for a couple, and then for every child is $25. And so we get big families. I said, hold on. I said, what happens if the prophecy doesn't come to pass? Do they get their money back? So
yeah, exactly.
So he said, no, we try. I said, there's no way that I'm going to do that, charge for prophecy. So I think one of the big things, of course, is the greed, the money aspect of it, because a lot of these prophets use their gift to end up raising money or being paid for their prophetic insights. If a guy doesn't preach the word in and out of season, then he's not a true prophet for sure.
Right. There was one aspect I want to shift the conversation a little bit, because Chuck mentioned this in the beginning of the broadcast, and that was the sense of the integrity and realness of you as a character and in a ministry. We've known lots of people in ministry. They're one person in front of the camera, but there's someone else backstage, so to speak. And I don't want to pry too much, but both Chuck and I were profoundly impressed by the family life, the commitment you have to your natural and adopted children. Tell us a little bit about that, as much as you feel comfortable to. But I think the viewers would like to hear a little bit behind the veil on Kim Clement and the Clement family in terms of the ministry that you have there. It's not just in front of the camera or behind the keyboard.
Oh, a major part of it is in with our family. Look, we've been married for 36 years, and I snatched her out the cradle, and she's been the boss ever since, you know. But we knew from the offset that, first of all, we were called to ministry, but we were called also to have a big family. We knew that, and so that commitment, to me, that's the greatest commitment. First of all, is to my marriage and family, and my children. So over the years, we've always maintained a very healthy, strong relationship as a family, and then, of course, our journey for adoption started in 2011, where I came into my bedroom and Jane was sitting on the bed just weeping. Now, Jane is not a weeper; she doesn't weep a lot, and she was just weeping and weeping. I said, "Jane, what's going on with you?" And she said, "You must go and pray. You go and pray and let God tell you," which is really not easy. So I went and prayed, and I really didn't know what was going on. So I came back and I said, "Well, just give me an idea." You know, so she said, "It's about adoptions," because I'd made a prediction about the Japanese earthquake on 3/11, which you know happened, and for some reason it really touched her deeply, and said, "Well, let's try and adopt a Japanese child." So I said, "No." I said, "Jane, listen, I mean, you know, we've got 5 children already." I said, "And you're looking at an adopted child." I said, "It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of, you know." So I went to my garden and I prayed, and I said, "Lord, you need to show me." And of course, I said, "You could send me an oracular sign, oracular intimation, any way you want, send me a sign." And 2 little hummingbirds flew in and stayed above my head and just didn't leave. And so I went back and told Jane, and we ended up adopting 2 little special needs children from China. That was the first step. And it was just, everything changed from that point. And what changed, I say, it brought so much into our home. And then we started helping fund surgeries for adopted children. Jane, in fact, we've done about 400, 500 surgeries for adopted children, raised money for that. And then we adopted another one. And then, of course, for those that don't know that, we were trying to help a little boy who has a massive tumor on his face. And so Jane said to me, "We need to get a doctor to this child because he's in China, he's going to die." His tumor was, you know, massive. If you've ever watched our show, you'll see him on it. But anyway, so I said, "Well, that's fine. You know, let's send a doctor there. Let's get a team." And this is such an unusual tumor that they said, the Chinese said, "No, we're not releasing him to go to America to have surgery, and basically he's going to die because nobody can do it here unless somebody adopts him." And I knew it was going to come up next. And then Jane said, "Well, we need to adopt him." So I said, "Jane, that'll be our 4th child." You know, so she said, "Well, you go and pray about it." And the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me. He said, "Look, I blessed you. I blessed your family. I blessed you in so many ways. You need to take this child in." And this was probably one of the biggest challenges in our life. in our lives. And so we got him from China and brought him here, and he's gone through about 4 surgeries, and he's looking absolutely stunningly beautiful. And it's going to be a testimony for the kingdom of God. So a lot of our ministry is in our house, in our own family. And, I could go on and on and on, but we do have a very strong, tight-knit family, and they're all musical and they all love the Lord.
Well, certainly our visit with you and you allowing us to cross paths with your family and integrate certainly had a profound impact on us, especially in the sense that we saw worked out in you a type of the Father's love for us, in that we had an incurable disease, and the way in which He helped us was by adopting us. And you showed that in a very powerful way within your own family, and it touched us quite deeply. And that's why when we came back and people began to ask concerning the ministry here, what's going on with Chuck Missler? He's this straight arrow Bible teacher, and he's linking up with the South African rock and roller, and there was a tie there. And I think that one of the reasons for our broadcast here and the chance to get to talk to you today was to just show that the bonds of God's agape love it can provide a foundation and a strength, I think, that is a tremendous testimony within the world. I'm sure that if I were to go through all of the questions that I have sitting on my desk here, we could probe and pry at many various things. But I think the thing that impresses us and we want to feed back to you is that you were the same on stage as off stage, and within your own family also.
And there's also a thing about personal integrity.
Yes.
One of the things that has puzzled me as I moved from the 30 years in corporate boardrooms to 30 years in professional Christianity,
right.
is I could never understand why it is that there isn't the sanctity of a commitment that I took for granted in the boardrooms.
Right.
That I couldn't really find within the Christian community. Not that pastors aren't good guys, but there was no concept of what I call the sanctity of a commitment that just drives Wall Street, for example.
Right.
And I didn't really, that's puzzled me for years until I think it was you, the one that pointed out to me first. Second was 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5, where 7 qualities are listed.
Yes.
Add to your faith. Virtue is the King James, which doesn't rattle when you shake it. That's an abstraction. But it's in that list of 7 things. The first thing, add to your faith,
virtue,
moral conduct.
Yes.
And I was stunned to realize that we don't teach, generally in the American culture, we don't teach personal integrity.
Yes.
The rest of the world takes that for granted, even in the boardrooms.
Yeah.
But in the Christian community, you don't find that. And it's not that they're bad people, they're just untrained. There's a term that you never hear them use. It's called fiduciary, a standard term among lawyers and professionals, but it's a word that most people are not familiar with unless they've been trained. And what's interesting, the Greek term for fiduciary is koinonia. So
oh, right,
it's
yes.
that we should be expert in. And one of the things that I was startled in, as you look, even before education and understanding and all these, there's a list of 7. The first is moral conduct. And that one of the reasons that was so touching to me as I got to know Kim, because here was a guy that was obviously a guy with personal integrity, his candor, his transparency, not just us privately, to his audience.
Yeah.
That just stunned me. And I find it hard to find examples of that match. And I'm not talking about theology here, I'm not talking about some theological position here. No, none of that.
Yeah.
Is that his personal integrity just bonded, from my point of view, bonded us overnight.
Well, certainly we've been around, you and I've been around people in ministry, you longer than I, by the way, been around ministers and people in ministry and so on and so forth. And there almost seems to be an overemphasis on add to your faith ministry content rather than moral conduct.
Yes.
And they're worried about what's the content of my life that the people see rather than what's going on inside that's the moral conduct that ultimately will be the anchor that will sustain them in ministry. There's lots of people that are very talented, very gifted, have a lot to say and to give, but they might start strong, but they can't end strong because there isn't that foundation of moral character there.
I find the word is integrity.
Yes.
That they have a backbone. And that's what's so lacking in our culture in general. Mm-hmm. That's what's lacking in our leadership, in politics. That's what makes Netanyahu such a breath of fresh air from Israel.
Right.
How distinctive he is from the previous leadership. Right. The early leadership had backbone. You look at Ben Gurion and Golda Meir. These people were committed. He's anyway. The point, there's a factor there that is fundamental. And it really still surprises me to realize that the first 30 years of my executive career, my 30 years in the corporate boardrooms, I was spoiled because I was able to, I dealt with a group of people. They may not have been saved, they didn't know who Jesus was, but when they made a commitment, you could bank on it. Right. And a handshake was a commitment. Right. And they felt that their name, their reputation was something worth protecting and investing in. Yes. And that's a concept that seems to have evaporated in the boardrooms today too, by the way. That's, when I was there, that was a couple of decades ago. And of course, Wall Street's changed also. Yes. But the thing that still puzzles me, why it is within the Christian community, among the Christian leadership, there isn't that sanctity of commitment you generally find. And that's what's so refreshing when you encounter someone that has that backbone, that integrity. Right. And so I focus on that because a lot of people will quibble about this doctrine or that. That's not the issue. It's the personal integrity that overshadows that, in my opinion. So. Yes, absolutely. Kim, you just returned, I understand, from a trip to Israel. You make, obviously you're seeing Israel now through a little different eyes, especially. So give us a little bit of a trip report. What was that like? What was the Lord showing you while you were there?
Okay, before I answer that, I'd like to say something about what Chuck just said, what you said about Chuck being, associated, or our friendship that's developing between us, this rock guy and this. Well, not one of our people, and we have hundreds of thousands, literally, that complained, not one. I think this president in the United States of America could have done a lot less damage had he been apt to say, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, or whatever. And so I've always kept myself open and said, Lord, if I'm going the wrong way, then I want you to show me. So when I prayed, send me a general, and of course I heard him. Our people were, first they saw the openness that I had towards this whole aspect of, and not just, like you said, not just eschatology, but they love it, and they're thankful to me for bringing him, and have written me hundreds have written in saying thank you so much for introducing us to one of the finest teachers, and so on. So I think I know it's a God thing. It's totally a God thing. And so God said to me, he said, you treat whom I send you with great care and look after them. And this is a general. And you need him. You need his covering. You need his protection. You need his wealth of knowledge. And so it was an absolute privilege and honor. So it's, thank you so much. Just thank you. And for all of you watching, thank you for lending him to us.
I look forward to returning.
Please, and we are too. And Jane is biting at the bit over there now, carrying on. So she wants you to come back too. Israel, look, when I started, of course, when I decided and realized that God's interest in Israel was not, it wasn't spiritual Israel, but was Israel itself, I decided to bless the land and to be there and to minister to people and to help the children. We've built bomb shelters, many, many bomb shelters for them in their homes. public bomb shelters. There's a group called Shalva, who they look after special needs. They facilitate special needs, challenged children. We're helping them in their building. So it's practical stuff. I've been to the borders. I've prayed on the borders. I've met with dignitaries. I've given a word to Bibi Netanyahu. I have. So it's so anyway. It's like Chuck says. He's not worried about Israel. It's not Israel that he's worried about. God, Israel will be taken care of. But I've been there. Oddly enough, whenever there's been a war. In fact, we were there in June last. It was June last year when they had all the bombings. We were there. We had to run to a bomb shelter at one stage. So the Lord really sent me there to, if I could say this, to use this term, prophetically pray. We've gone to borders. We've gone to, and we've just done that. And then, of course, we've had huge meetings there. And so this last trip really was just to go and to do some of that good works, and to help them and to just help them. And so that's what we've done.
Now, in terms of your internet broadcast, you gave us a little bit of background in terms of how that got started. A little room, start preaching, people, and then that grew into a church presence, an internet church presence. Give us a little bit of background on that. What is that? What are the aspects of that ministry?
Okay, for 30 years I traveled. We traveled every week. We've traveled throughout the United States of America and the world. And I was, of course, when we did our concert at King David Citadel in Jerusalem in 2011, that's also when we adopted. And it was then that, it was just before that, but Jane said, start the internet. And little did we know that we were going to adopt these children, that my presence as a father would be required in the home. We couldn't travel as much. So we did this one camera thing, and we had, literally tens of thousands of people come on at once. And we had over 1 million people, viewers over a few days. And so we realized that this was something that God had, or a well that he had opened up for us. And it just increased and increased. And, I was waiting for it to go away. Well, quite honestly, I thought this is just too good to be true. It just grew and grew and grew. And so, and it developed into what it is today. We've got a building. We've actually bought land. We are building a facility for in Los Angeles to broadcast from, and also to evangelize, because of course I minister to many of these entertainers in the industry. We have a lot of them coming to our meetings. They're interested in the mystical aspect of it, but and so they come in expecting a word from God, and of course I do what I do. But mainly, to me, it's prophetic evangelism. So it's really reaching out to them, and doing what Jesus did for the woman at the well, where he told a little bit about herself, and off she went, and got the city to come and listen to him. So it's developed into that now. So I think with Chuck coming, obviously the Spirit of the Lord wanted me to start. And my teachings would change. There'd be a lot of stuff that would change. And so to us it's a beautiful journey, because there's a constant reinventing taking place, that's happening in our lives. So it's got very big and very exciting.
Well, Chuck, any parting words as we let Kim go? And
no, I just wanted our people to know that we regard him as a friend and a member of the family.
Right.
And I just look forward to any excuse to come back to Camarillo and spend more time with him. And so we'll be looking at my calendar to see when we can put that together, and look very much forward to that. And so
where's Jane?
Jane there?
I wanted to just say goodbye, but she's
Okay.
sitting
She's
in the
moved
back.
out
She
of the
doesn't want to
studio.
come to the camera, but
Well, say hi to Jane for me. She's our secret weapon. She's the one
yes.
that got us into the tent there, I think. Yeah.
she'll be watching you, and she'll say, Kim, come here. You need to hear this. And then I'll say, Jane, my goodness, and there's so much information. I'm trying to work it. She's come say goodbye to them here, Jane. because she's the instigator. She's the problem here.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, we're so
Hello,
Hi,
Jane.
Jane, hi, Jane.
Good
Nice
to see you.
We're looking
I'm
forward
so
to coming
excited
back.
this is all happening, and you know, it's just meant to be. It's part of the Lord's plan for us, and we just so excited to be able to be a part of everything. And like Kim said, you know, we watch a lot. I watch a lot of stuff. I'm always calling you, come and watch this now, Kim.
She said to me, is it Mystery Babylon or is it actual Babylon? I said, Jane, I don't know yet. I don't know everything.
Say both. Say both and you're covered. You betcha. You betcha. No, love to see you again. I'm looking forward to coming back. It's been a
Yes,
great
we're very
time.
excited about it.
Try and do September if you can. We love you guys. Thank you very much.
God bless you very much.
God bless you both. God bless you both.
Well, Chuck, very good. I trust that our viewers have been able to at least see a little bit behind the veil. One of the problems, I think, and we do have a number of questions that have come in from various people, you know, under the auspices of discernment and questioning. And I think that it's healthy to question one another and to test each other. But as our own ministry can attest to, not everything published on a website is true.
No,
Would
that's
you
right.
agree with that?
That's right.
We are not Jesuit priests, part of the Illuminati.
No, right.
And
And
so on and so
I
forth.
often joke we're a non-profit ministry. And we have people that use an Old Testament title
Yes.
for a New Testament grace.
Yes.
And that's quibbling about, in my opinion, semantics.
Right.
So that's why I look through all that for the quality of character.
Yes.
The integrity, because that's fundamental. And that was what bonded me with him right up front.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me is when you study the character of false prophets that's revealed in the New Testament. Kim made reference to it, and it is interesting that one of the things we're told to do is to look at their fruits.
Yes. To be fruit inspectors, not gift inspectors.
Yes, and say, well, what's coming as a result of what's happening here? And I think that the candor, the willingness to admit that there have been mistakes that have been made, there have been misspoke things that have been done, but that capacity to be instructed and corrected, I think, is admirable for any of us that would dare.
It's admirable, but the tragedy, it's very rare.
Yes.
It's amazing how you never underestimate the capacity of the human being to rationalize.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how people will backtrack or cover or not confront, especially not openly, publicly.
Yes.
And that's what's so refreshing about someone that is that secure in his position with Christ, is to be able to lay himself out with candor.
That's
and
right.
That's exciting. That's refreshing.
He calls you a general, but I was going to correct him and say you went to the Naval Academy. You should call you an admiral.
But no,
Very good. All right.
Yeah,
well,
you
with
betcha.
that, let's say goodbye to our viewing audience. Thank you for joining us, and join us next week for the next question and answer session with Chuck Missler. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you for being with us.